Hello and welcome to another episode of the Uncommon Energy Podcast. On this week's episode, we'll be talking about this past weekend's Arlington Regional Championships, the largest regional championships of all time, and of course, the fact that Lugia VSTAR won the event. We'll talk about a little bit of controversy surrounding the upcoming San Diego Regional Championships with the Decklist submission deadline. So we'll be discussing that. We'll, of course, have everyone's favorite segment, Guess That Flavor Text. And we'll close out the episode by talking about the current prizing structure for regionals. This is a topic we've talked about a few times, but it does feel prevalent after we're coming off of a weekend of the largest tournament of all time, where several people who played in day two only came away with 30 championship points, no packs, no money. We'll talk about that and more on this week's episode. As always, my name is Chip Ritchie, and I'm joined by my co-host, Azul GG. What's up, Azul? How we doing? How was your weekend in Arlington?
Pretty good, pretty good. It was interesting, or it was a good event as always. Ended up top 16 once again. This time I did win my win in or win and hope I don't bubble, and then I bubbled at 9th place. But still, once again, another regional or another tournament where I achieved my goal of feeling like I put myself in a pretty good spot to make top 8. Wasn't able to come up with a top 8 this time as well, just like the last time. But still feeling like I'm putting myself in a good spot each time. So I'm just, they'll come around eventually. And I got a little week or a little break before the next one, thankfully, because I was getting started to get a little burnt out. And going to this event, I was feeling pretty burnt out. So I got a little bit of break. Got the holidays coming up. Going to take a break for that as well, away from content and all that stuff in general. This coming up weekend, and then back into kind of the whole grind again after Christmas. But what about you, Chip? How was your weekend? This time you were playing. You weren't casting, but you did make it on the onto the stream.
I did make it onto the stream. That's right. Yeah. So I did play in the regionals this weekend for anyone who's listening who didn't hear that in the last couple episodes, but yeah, I did participate as a player. Azul and the crew let me into kind of the testing process. I was preparing with them in the couple weeks leading up to the event, and we did end up playing the Lost Box deck. So I played the same 60 as the crew. Trusted the spreadsheet. We'll talk maybe in the future a little bit about the process and some of my perspectives on being an outsider coming in and seeing how they all work, how the machine kind of functions, right? But it was really cool to see, and I really appreciate y'all letting me come in and be a part. And I had a good time participating in some of the conversations. There was a lot of decks that we talked about in the couple weeks leading up to the tournament. I don't think that anyone necessarily expected to play Lost Box Kyogre. I think everyone knew that it was like probably going to be the top choice if nothing else came up, but every avenue got explored. All kinds of different decks, of course, Lugia, and then every other well-known deck, and then some other off-meta decks that people wouldn't expect and wouldn't be able to even guess what the decks were, right? All kinds of things getting tested and stuff like that. That some work out and some just turn out to be bad ideas, right? But it's really interesting to see just kind of how that whole process works. But yes, like you said, I did play in the tournament. I did finish at a 5-3-1 record, meaning that I lost on that winning in, which they did put me up on the stream for the winning in. I guess like it was just meant to be or something like that. Poetic justice almost, right? Like if I'm not working the stream, I got to get put up there at some point maybe, but it was fun. It was first time I'd ever played up on the big stage with like the white noise and all that going on. It wasn't too bad. I hear people talk and like complain about the white noise a lot, and it was kind of like a little bit of a surprise at first, but then I just kind of once the game started zoned in and wasn't too worried about it. I do want to talk about my top 8 game. I don't know, or not my top 8, my winning in game. I don't know if you watched any of it, Azul, or have got like you were
Mm.
obviously playing in the round. I don't know if you've gone back and watched any of it, but I talked to you about it a little bit after, I know, but I definitely I scooped game 1 early because I didn't think I was gonna win. I was playing up against Reggie's, which I think is a close matchup. I know you think for the deck that it's like a favored matchup, and I think the group is like kind of split. It's like between slightly favored to like 50-50 ish, something like that. It's probably somewhere around there, right?
Yeah.
But things didn't go great for me in game 1, so I scooped quickly because I wanted to win a game 2, game 3, and you need a lot of time if that's going to happen. And then Game 2, I made a couple of like dumb sequencing issues in the first turn because I was trying to play quickly. I battle VIP passed and put down a Sableye instead of a Comfey because it was purple, and I was just trying to play quickly, Um, but it all got figured out. I ended up, I think I would have been in an okay spot to still win game 2, but I misremembered my prizes. I prized a water energy. I thought I had the 2 remaining water energies. So I lost zoned the second one, and then I went and played Mirage Gate, and my other water energy was not in there. And so I was like, crap, I can't use Greninja. When on a turn I would have been able to take 2 prizes. So that probably just put me a little too far out. And then I just had in the mid game crazy tough lost box comfy flower selecting decisions where I flower selecting into Sableye plus energy recycler. I was like, okay, I'll just have to play with my one Sableye. Kept the recycler. Next one, flower selecting into Kyogre plus energy recycler. And it was like, okay, well, sure. And I think at that point, that was after the water energy thing where I knew I only had one left in the deck and one was in the prizes. So I was like, okay, goodbye, Kyogre. Can't probably use you anyway. But yeah, it just ended up being a tough one. It is what it is. And I had a great time playing. I would love to play in more tournaments in the future. I'd say my preference is to cast and like work the event, but I'm glad I had that experience for the first time in a while.
Yeah, so if
I
the
just talked for
opportunity
a
ever
really
comes up.
long time, so I'm sorry for that. But I just like rambled for like 4 minutes, I feel like.
It's good to have you playing with us, Chip, for sure. Yeah, and if you ever don't cast any more future events, you're always welcome. And yeah, I'm sure you'd be open to playing again if that ever happens. But yeah, we'll probably see you in the booth. The majority of the time you show up at Pokemon events. And speaking of Pokemon events, well, I guess we were talking about Pokemon events, but the winner of the Pokemon event, Connor Finton, won Arlington Regionals with Lugia, which I don't think is a surprise that Lugia won. I also don't think it's
No.
really that big of a surprise that Lugia kind of regained its dominance over the format, over the meta, because the deck is so ridiculously versatile. It sometimes can't deal with the unknown, but once the unknown is known, it's very easily for the deck to adapt either strategy wise, just learning matchups, or just, the right tech cards for certain matchups as well. Right. So that's kind of what we saw. Lugia list adjusted. There's like Drapions from Mewtwo V Unions. There was Bird Keepers. There was Eldegoss. There was all these things. I think John Ang played Regigigas and 2 Pats of the Peak as like an answer to Arcturalodons, right? So everyone was like, okay, these are the things that Lugia struggles against. Okay, well, we can make our Lugia deck beat them. So they were kind of had that one weekend where we saw a bunch of Lugia do pretty poorly overall. Not terrible, really, right? Like 2 weekends ago, but pretty poorly. And then Lugia had its bounce back this week and returned to its dominance. Like I said, Connor taking the whole thing down with actually not that many tech cards in the list, right? No Dunsparce or Manaphy, which is actually definitely a surprise. I didn't realize that until the beginning of the cast here. I hadn't looked at the list yet, but yeah, no Dunsparce or Manaphy in Connor's list.
Which I think probably aided him in his mirror matches, which if you look at Connor's
Mm-hmm.
Twitter, he played against a bunch of mirror matches before top 8, in the 15 rounds. I think it was a total of 10 out of the 15 rounds, and then he played the mirror once in top 4 as well. So out of his 18 total rounds, he played against 11 Lugia mirrors, which is crazy, but really not a surprise because of how popular it was. I will say I played 9 rounds. I played against 0 Lugia, so I don't know what happened there, but it just didn't work
And for
out for me
Connor,
there. But yeah,
for Connor to play against 11, someone's got to play against 0. I guess that
right.
was you. But yeah, Lugia was what 30% of the meta in day 1, 29.4 or something, and then day 2, I think it was 38% of the, or it's 29. Yeah, 29. I don't know what I said. 29.4 or something. 29% day 1, 38% day 2. So still kind of returning to its dominance or maintaining its dominance of meta percentage in the format for sure. Like that didn't really change week to week. It was a little bit less in Toronto. We never got the numbers for Stuttgart or Brisbane, did we? For Metashare, did we? Maybe we got it for Brisbane. I don't know if we ever got it for Stuttgart though.
I think that they all got released like the Friday before the tournament. So I think that they're probably going to be updated on Limitless shortly. Yeah, they've got the top 16 now on Limitless for Australia. Stuttgart has all of day 2, it looks like. So we do have those numbers now. In day 2 of Stuttgart, Lugia was 35%, Mew was 23%.
Okay.
So, I mean,
That's just
about
for day
what you
2
would
though. We don't have like day
expect.
1s. Well,
No,
yeah, but
no.
the day 2 is if the day 2 is similar, then it probably is yeah, like it seems like Lugia is basically 30% of the meta everywhere. And then going into day 2s, it's bumping up to like 35 to 40% because we almost have 40% in Toronto, right? Oh, it was LAIC was 40%, I think.
Yeah.
It was
No,
30 to
LAIC
40.
day 2 was like 55%.
Oh, sheesh.
Yeah, it was crazy. Let me
It
go
was
click
even
on it.
worse, yeah.
I'll check
Yeah.
on you can I love the fact on Limitless you can track all this stuff, but
Yeah,
oh,
shout out to
yep.
Robin and the whole Limitless crew for everything they do, of course. Also, I didn't know if you knew this, but they ran they've been running the streams for like the most recent regionals.
Yeah, I
But
knew
they have
that.
like the
Yeah.
floating hand cam
Yeah.
and stuff. Like that's some big production going on there. So shout out to Limitless. I mean, I think Connor is kind of the head of all that, organizing all of that stuff for the Limitless team with that kind of stuff. I think I don't know for sure, but yeah, shout out to all they're doing over in general, but also over in Europe for getting the production for some streams because usually there's that. When was the last time have they ever done like an official regional stream in Europe? I think they've done it once or twice, right?
They did UK Nats, I think, in like 2015,
Okay, I think they did one regional at one
or
point.
2016, maybe.
Might be wrong. I don't remember correctly.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe so at some point. That like they streamed regionals a handful of times in like 2016, 2017, but then they stopped and then it was all grassroots. I don't think since Pokemon took back over doing all the North American regional streams that there has been a European stream done
yeah.
by Pokemon since like January of 2020. So,
Yeah. Yeah, so Lugia, yeah, absolutely dominating since its release. You know, it's been like 30% of day one metas, and then yeah, 35 to I mean, I don't know. LAIC is a little bit of an outlier because it was the first tournament, so we should probably
yeah.
say like 35 to 40% of all the day two. So even like Brisbane, which was only a top 8 cut, top 16 was still 37%. So and for me personally, I feel like that's actually a point where like I feel like that is like that's just a number you can put on it where you like for me personally, and maybe someone has some other data to back this up or a different opinion on it, but I think that means a card is too good when it's a third of the meta consistently. Like if it's just the first tournament and it's like, well, this deck is broken. And I don't have time to figure out an answer to this, so I'm just gonna play the broken deck, right? That's one thing.
Yeah.
And then you would have like the Toronto week where it's like, oh, we have all these answers for this deck actually, but then because Lugia is so good, Lugia Archeops is so good and so versatile. It's like, well, the next week after, it's like, well, I fixed the matchups as the Lugia players, and now it's still just the number one deck by far. And it actually was never gonna ever get dethroned, despite all these paralysis and energy control decks. Because they're actually not good enough to actually beat Lugia when Lugia knows they exist, right?
Yeah.
So do you have a different thought on that or a different take on that, or because like for me, when I think like a third of the meta, I think that's when the deck is just too good. Like when the cards are too good.
Yeah, I'm trying to go back and look at what some of like the early Garbodor meta shares were in day two. Like obviously everyone talks about that Seattle regionals where it was like
Yeah, but I think that's a good
22 of the
example of
top
it.
32, but that's like an extreme.
Yeah,
That's like an outlier, obviously. And that's like, I think we saw that at LAIC, right? 55%
yeah,
of day
yeah.
two. And
I think
then
it's a good
you would
example of it.
expect it to scale back down maybe to like the
Yeah,
20%. I think like 20, maybe 25%
that's
is more
fine. Yeah.
reasonable. But when you get to 33%, a third of the meta consistently, yeah, I agree. It's probably, I mean, it's, I think, obvious that Lugia was the most powerful card in the format. You know, just thanks to I mean, it's not just Lugia, right? It's the Archeops, like it's the whole thing working together.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and yeah, maybe it is just a little too strong. It is less fun to play in metas where there is a deck that is that massive of a percentage. I feel
Yeah.
like
Especially
variety. Mhm.
when you can't even be like, I'm gonna play a deck that just beats it, and then like
Yeah,
uh and like have that kind of be your your drive to success throughout that tournament. It feels like that's not like no deck just beats Lugia. Like even I mean I guess like what we got close to was maybe we could talk about the second place list, Alex Kreckler with definitely a rogue take. So I guess there was a rogue deck that kind of pulled through the hordes of Lugia. It was a Vikavolt build from Alex Kreckler. They got second place. They did lose to Lugia in the finals. Connor Finn. I think one of the strengths of Alex's deck was definitely the unknown, going up against so many people who had no idea what was going on. And I'm sure a lot of their wins came from that. But that's the advantage of coming up with something new, unique, and different. Or just playing something like a little bit different in like your list. Like a lot of the Lost Box decks are like playing a lot of different things. So I'm sure a lot of like I got some pretty good a couple dubs because I played a boss in my Lost Box this weekend. Where like the couple weeks before my Kyogre list or the Kyogre list that my group played had no boss in it, right? So then
right.
all of a sudden I had a boss. No one really played around my boss, and then I got some cheesy wins that way, right?
Yeah,
And Kreckler's build is a Vikavolt deck. heavily built around having the option of a turn one paralyzing bolt if you do go second. But there's also a 1/1 Aerodactyl V-Star in here. And the Aerodactyl V-Star, for anyone who doesn't know, has an attack, Ancient Star. It is a V-Star power attack. For one colorless energy, until this Pokemon leaves play, it gains an ability that has the effect your opponent's Pokemon V in play, except any Aerodactyl V-Star have no abilities. So if you go first with this card, did we talk about this
A little
the
bit, yeah.
Arceus build of this deck last time? Yeah. So you go first, you turn two, use the Aerodactyl V-Star with the Ancient Star, and then the Lugia player can't use Summoning Star, and then can't get their Archeops in play.
Yep.
And then they basically living off manual attachments, trying to either KO the Aerodactyl or, draw enough prize cards that way. But it's pretty tough to do when then on the following turn as the Aerodactyl player, you're hitting with Vikavolt or Raikou V or something like that, and just making making it a hard time for the Lugia player. So yeah, it did get stopped in the finals against the Lugia. But probably beat upon quite a few Lugias throughout the day,
Yeah.
and then also has a pretty strong Lost Box matchup as well. I think it's probably struggling up against, just stuff like Arceus decks and stuff like that. But when they're not that popular, also Reggie's maybe would have been a difficult match for Kreckler. They did beat one in top 8. And there was a decent amount of Reggie in day 2, and that did like Reggie's success rate was pretty high overall for how
Yeah.
much it was played. But it was cool to see at least one kind of rogue deck kind of step up to the plate, and it wasn't able to take it down in the end, but got pretty close.
Yeah, this deck's definitely cool. And I don't even think that it has to go first against Lugia to beat it as well
Yeah.
because of how strong turn 1 item lock is, right? Like the strategy is obvious when you go first. You get down Aerodactyl V, turn 2 V Star. But if you go second, you try to get that turn 1 Vikavolt while benching the Aerodactyl, and then just cross your fingers and hope your opponent can't get off their Summoning Star, which it can be difficult for them to do under item lock, especially with so many of these lists cutting to 2 Arceus V or Lugia V Star in their deck, right? They're relying on the fact that they play 4 Ultra Ball and 4 Evolution Incense to go get that Evolution Pokemon out. If you can cut them off of playing those cards to find their Lugia, they get 1 turn of items without being able to play a supporter, really.
Mhm.
And it's reasonable that they might miss or might only get out 1 Archeops. And if they get out just 1 Archeops, sure, they'll be able to use it. Then you don't have to go with your Aerodactyl, obviously, because they've already used their 1 V-Star power for the game, their 1 real Pokemon V with an ability, I guess, besides Luminion. So you can just try to navigate the game from there. And it's much more reasonable to do when they've only got 1 Archeops to work with.
Yeah, yeah. So you either go first and you get the turn 2, completely lock them out of the game with the Aerodactyl, or you go second, you get the turn 1 item lock off, you get that set up, you get that going, and then they're item locked, right? Then they have to struggle to even set up to begin with, and then you can follow up with Aerodactyl, or you can kind of like try and snowball the game off your item lock potentially as well, right? Because if they don't like play Dunsparce or can't get into play because you item locked them, the Vigavolt's hitting pretty hard overall up against the Lugia, right? And then
Especially
you
if
have the
there's no
right to
Dunsparce, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. Especially if there's no Dunsparce, which is Connor didn't even have the Dunsparce as well, so it's kind of like almost like perfect scenario for Alex going into the finals. No Dunsparce up against a Lugia deck. All right, sounds good. Yeah, but then it still once again did not end up working out in
So
the end. And yeah, the rest of the top 8 was swarmed by Lugia. 4 other Lugias in top 8, alongside one Reggie and 1 Lost Box to fill it out.
yeah, I wanted to talk about in Connor's list a little bit. So we did see a few techs kind of get popular the last weekend previous in Toronto, the Espeon VMAX being the main one, but then also like Birdkeeper plus Eldegoss being something that popped up a little bit at that tournament. Now, looking at Connor's list, he didn't have those things. He did have the 1 Birdkeeper, but there's no Eldegoss to reuse it. And he did favor the 1 Raikou, which is something we actually saw from one of the American groups down at LAIC, but it's something that they had kind of removed from their deck. So I don't know, where does Raikou kind of find its value? Why is it worth a slot in this deck? I mean, is it really even that good in the mirror? It's like probably decent, right?
So it's okay in the mirror, especially if they're not playing Dunsparce, and everyone's playing Orangaroo now, so you can kind of get like an amazing shot off with Choice Belt, and you can go like KO a Lugia, and then also KO the Guru off the bench. And
Which is like, I
if
guess, better value than Eviltall, right? Because you're taking 3
yeah,
prizes instead of 2, and it's a little easier to get to. And also, I guess it gives you an option to get to it if you only get out 1 Archeops, right? Because
yeah,
it's harder to get to Eviltall if you only get out 1 Archeops. But this, you can just go attach plus use Archeops, right?
yeah, and there's like also situations where it's like if they use Yveltal against you, you can go like Raikou, Boss, and Archeops, KO Archeops plus their Yveltal, and then you take away all their energy out of play and then remove one of their energy acceleration cards as well. Of course, that's reliant on them not having Dunsparce or Manaphy in play and not playing them potentially because they could just put it in play. So the Raiku's like okay. The one thing about the Raikou though is like you're most of the time you're cutting yourself off from having the option of Yveltal if you attack with Raikou,
Right.
depending on your list. Like Connor's list specifically cannot attack with both. If you attack with one of them, you're just not attacking with the other, right? So that's like one of the main reasons I don't like playing both or seeing both in lists, is just because like you can't use both. So just playing the better one to make your deck more consistent usually feels a little bit better to me. It also has some strength though in like the Lost Box matchup where Yveltal is basically a dead card because I mean it can draw 2 prize cards sometimes, right? Like every Lost Box deck plays Manaphy. But Raikou wasn't super popular in Lugia leading up to this point, so you could definitely probably catch a couple Lost Box players not rushing out the Manaphy when they could have, just assuming you don't have the Raikou in the Lugia deck. Like at Toronto Regionals, I didn't play like any of my Lugia opponents played Raikou, and none of them did. So,
Yeah.
like, and that's what I'm sure some people did going into this weekend, kind of the same thing. I was like, well, I don't think you're gonna have the Raikou, so I'm not gonna bench my Manaphy turn one. If you do have it, I guess I am getting punished. But game 2, game 3, you can work with that information from there. So but we did see a couple Raikus in the top 8 as well. I think Liam also played it. Unless you had anything else to say about Connor's list, we could talk about Liam's list from there. I guess did have the Raikou, but also had 2 canceling Cologne, an echoing horn, capturing aroma, and no choice belt. So probably the strangest Lugia list I think maybe in the tournament.
Definitely up there. Yeah, the capturing aroma. I hadn't even realized that was that was in here. I knew about the colognes and the horn, and there was a few people who were on the cologne and the horn. And I do think like I don't know about the cologne as much. I do like the echoing horn kind of in Lugia though,
Yeah,
especially because I mean just having cards like that in your deck for a tournament where it's closed deck list, your opponent isn't necessarily going to see it coming, and especially so often in the mirror. I feel like this is a card that can get you back into the mirror where they're not going to expect you to have something like that, so they're not going to put a bunch of one prizes on the bench to prevent a play where you can go echoing horn, bring up a Lugia V, knock it out, and take 2 prizes to win the game.
yeah,
It is a little difficult to find it at the right time. It is a one of. You can
yeah.
preserve it a little bit with the Guru if you happen to find it early, right? You can always put it back on top so you don't have to research it away necessarily. But I think that that's something you consistently see from good players at events is that they'll like I mean you talked about with the boss, right? People not expecting you to have boss and then it was able to win you games. Having something like that in your back pocket that's just a little bit of an unexpected element. I mean, and that's the case for Connor as well with the Raikou potentially, right, in his list. So I think that that's something that you always want to try to bring something a little spicy, a little unexpected in your deck to a regionals.
Yeah, unless you truly have like the perfect 60, and
That's
there's no
just
reason to not just
consistent,
run it
yeah.
again. Yeah, there's no reason to just not run it again. And everyone will be trying to counter it, but there's no counter to it. Then you'd run that again. But yeah, you always want to try and mix things up a little bit. Yeah, so the canceling clones, good for all the cheesy decks that are trying to beat Lugia, the Weezings that are out on Arceus. Like canceling clone is kind of your out in those matchup. Echoing Horn also good against Arceus Duraludon as well. The canceling clone gives you a way to actually hit the Duraludon. You still can't one hit KO it without a choice belt
Right.
though. So you'd have to go like cologne hit, which still seems kind of awkward to be honest. But it does allow you to beat Weezing. And then also because you have the Raikou, you can do stuff against Lost Box where you like boss the Manaphy and then play the canceling Cologne and then use Raikou to knock them both out. Once again, it's kind of a big chore. In Liam's list specifically, though, I do like the Raikou. It feels a little bit better because Liam is playing 7 of the non-colorless energy for Aurora, Hiding, Heat, and the Speed Lightning. So not too difficult to utilize Yveltal and Raikou potentially in a game. So that's like definitely a powerful combo to potentially utilize in the mirror match. But in this list as well, though, Liam doesn't have the choice belt, so you can't get those big one hits with the Raikou into a Lugia VSTAR. So you are like losing some value on that as well. But yeah, definitely interesting. Yeah, the capturing aroma. I don't know. I don't
Little
know.
questionable. I mean, listen, if you want a little bit more search and you've already got 4 Ultra Ball, 4 Ensigns, 4 Quick Ball,
It's
like
the best thing to go to, right?
I mean, it's better
Great
than
ball?
Great Ball, I guess, right?
Is it? I don't.
It always gets you
I,
something. Great Ball doesn't
yeah,
always
but
get you something.
yeah, and I guess like a majority of the time you're okay with just being like yeah, I want a basic here. I got I don't actually know what it is. I got the evolution heads or tails, whatever it is, I can just go get
Yeah.
an Archeops and discard it, right? Like maybe you didn't get the basic, maybe you didn't get your Guru in play like you wanted, but you went and just got an Archeops and set it up into the discard pile for the next turn,
And
right?
also, even if you find it later, it's like at always, at minimum, going to thin something out of the deck for you,
Yeah, that's
right?
true. Yeah,
So
you're
it's
always
like
thinning.
you're either gonna if it's late game and you're wanting to find a basic to win, like you've got so many other search cards, you'll probably have another one to get a basic out. And if
Hmm.
you flip to get a evolution, you can just go get an Archeops out of your deck, thin it out of there.
Yep.
Or if it's early turns and you're really wanting to get Archeops or you need to find that V-Star, you can go get a basic and you can thin a Lugia V out of the deck that you're not going to need anymore, right? And just discard it. So, yeah, I mean, it's like always something you're getting a card off of. So that would probably just make it slightly better than Great Ball, right? And it's also like search. So, like, if you, and sometimes you're just going to hit the one you want, right? You're going to hit the flip you want and it's going to be really good in those spots. So, I'm
Yeah.
not the biggest fan, but I don't totally hate it. Liam did also play against Tord on the winning end. So, and also for anyone who listening doesn't know, Liam is the senior division world champion. So he's playing his first year in the Masters division, and this was his first top 8 as a master. So, congratulations to Liam. That is very, not surprising that he would get a top 8 eventually, right? I think everyone knows that he's a great player and would be in top 8 in the Masters division at some point. But moving up in the divisions is always kind of a tough thing. The first couple tournaments for these young players, often there's a bit of growing pains, right? You realize, okay, we're not playing with the kiddos anymore. And yeah, Liam finally got his breakthrough performance with the top 8. Congratulations for sure.
Yeah, I was sitting next to Grass to Liam. I was sitting next to Liam and Tord on their game on the winning end. And I think Liam in game 3 was like didn't show Tord the echoing horn for the first 2 games, and then in game
Oh,
3 was able to use it
that's so
to win the
sick.
game. I think I remember hearing Tord say, "How did I not see all these cards in the first couple of games?" So I think like the capturing aroma was coming out, maybe the canceling colognes or whatever. Tord was definitely getting surprised by some of the stuff that he saw in the later. Definitely did not see any of those kind of cards in the first game, but then as the match progressed, they started to finally show themselves. Um, but yeah, it seems like you can definitely get a lot of value out of it. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe like looking at the list, I feel like there's so much potential for a choice belt to be so good. I think I would maybe say it might be a little bit better than the capturing aroma. The gamble on the
Probably,
aroma feels
probably
is a little bit
fair.
off. But yeah, very cool list. And yeah, like stuff like the canceling cologne and stuff is like cool text to deal with. Um, those decks out there, yeah, they're just trying to cheese Lugia, right? They're not actually trying to like. It feels like they're not trying to beat Lugia straight up. They're just trying to cheese them.
So the other two to talk about, we've got Jordan Gobert, who got top 4, played the Espeon VMAX, which we didn't see in any of the other top 8 lists, right? Riley didn't have it, so yeah, no one else had the Espeon, which is kind of interesting because that was like the big talked about card coming out of the weekend. Were people not playing Espeon because they were kind of just making the call that, oh, these counter decks that did exist aren't going to be as good. Like, we're not going to need the Espeon for the paralysis and the Evil Tall celebrations discarding our energy. We don't think control is going to be big. So they're just like, yeah, we're not worried about it, probably.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, we still saw like even Liam had Birdkeeper Eldegoss. I think everyone had a Birdkeeper almost at this event. I mean, we could even
Yes,
look on
yes.
Limitless. It seems like everyone had a Birdkeeper. I mean, we can even look right now and see how many people had Birdkeepers. Oh, actually, only 42%. Huh. But all the ones that's actually at the top half, like everyone who's in the top cut, I almost feel like has a Birdkeeper. Besides the Espeon build, I think maybe because you wouldn't want a Birdkeeper in that build. I don't think John played one either. But yeah, we saw like a lot of bird keepers. Saw some Espeons, right? So like
The
everyone had
Espeon build, by the way,
some
did
kind of
have the
answer.
Bird Keeper.
Oh, they had a bird keeper in there as well. Okay, it
Yep.
was even they had the bird keeper. So yeah, I mean, I guess the bird keeper is like the main one that people were including as a helpful answer to some of the paralysis stuff. It gives you a little bit more of a chance in those matchups. Are also really good against control as well. So yeah, everyone had a little bit of tech for it, but it didn't seem like people went too far. Of course, the Espeon builds, of course, like that's all you need. And like this build specifically was interesting from Jordan because it not only had the Espeon, there were still stadiums, right? There was still collapse, and there was a Path to the Peak, which is I guess the most interesting card in the list for me personally. Yeah, I'm not sure what their I can't think of anything reason behind off the top of my head why the Path to the Peak would be so good to rock in here. I
I
mean,
mean, for
Path's never a
Drape,
bad card to
for
have.
what's it called, right? For
Duraludon,
Duraludon, yeah.
I
Just
guess, but
have
you can't even one hit KO them. So
With
Oh, no, you
powerful
could.
energies, right?
Choice
Yeah.
belt. Yeah, 4 powerful choice belt. No, you're right, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I guess may have made that might be the reason then, right? Get the 1 hit KO.
Yeah, and it
That'll
also
even,
is
like
good in mirror if you find it, right? If you go
yeah.
second, find it, put it down, and then turn to pumpkaboo it away. Like,
Yeah, they
I
just
mean
can't find
that's
the
a lot to
answer.
ask for, sure, but it can happen.
It can happen, yeah.
So yeah, that's an interesting one. Also, one other card to talk about that I think there was a little bit of conversation about it in the last few days leading up to the tournament, but that is Drapion V in Lugia decks. So we saw
Yeah.
that from Jordan. It was also in Riley's list. That was a big part of it. And Drapion is just kind of a solid card, it turns out, right? Like, I mean, even when you're not playing against Mew, there's a lot of uses for it. It does a lot of damage. Um, it can one hit KO Espeon VMAX. It can one hit KO Mewtwo V Union. And I really imagine that those are the things that Lugia cares a little bit more about. It's nice to have the option against Mew, but it's almost more so for the Mewtwo's, I feel like, right?
Yeah, I actually don't even think it changes too much of your Mew matchup. Maybe a little bit because it's such an efficient attacker.
Yeah.
But Mew is trying to like go through 2 prize Pokemon, even at the trade-off of sometimes ignoring something like a Yveltal sometimes. I guess it can't be Parasol. Like you can't Parasol and stop Drapion from attacking you, so that's something I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess yeah, the Drapion seems solid. Like yeah, the Mew matchup's not as relevant for it. I feel like a lot of the time, it's more so. It feels like it's definitely more powerful. It's like as the answer for the Mewtwo V Union, it's like its
Yeah.
biggest reason to play it. Right, it's just good against Mewtwo V Union.
Yeah. Yeah, and the Espeon boost as well. So, the other
Yeah.
decks in top 8, we talked about Alex's Vikavolt deck. Of course, we do have Christian Fortnott with the Regigigas. So this was a deck that won the Japanese tournament. The what's it called? Not league. City League. No, not a City
Yeah,
League. What is
no,
it?
it's bigger than that.
Yeah.
Champion League.
Champions League. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The Champions League tournament, 3,000 players. It won over in Japan. Maybe that boosted a little bit of the confidence for people coming into this weekend.
Probably
And
had to, yeah.
it was the third most played deck, I believe, in day number 1. Maybe fourth most played behind Sablezard, something like that. It was up there. I don't remember. They showed it up on the stream, but
Yeah.
yeah, this list is pretty interesting. There's the 3 Regigigas, the 2-1 split of the Regielekis, and just 1 Registeel. The 1 Registeel plus
Getting
the 1
cheesy.
Hisuian Heavy Ball Gambit.
Yeah. Yeah, you're trying to get a little cheesy there with the 1 of Steel. It's like one of the least used Reggies. And it's going to be really hard for anyone to really figure out. You know, they look at your bench and they're like, all right, if you're going to like go boss KO Reggie off the bench, you're going to be like, all right, well, I'm probably going to chase their Drago here. Or if they have a rock or an ice in the discard pile, I'm going to go chase that. But you never see a Reggie Steel in the discard pile because there's only 1 in the deck. So you're never going to be like, all right, well, if I KO this Reggie Steel, they won't have another Reggie Steel because, there's none in the discard pile. So they have the other Reggie Steel. But they have Reg Ice in the discard pile. I'm going to go boss KO that. And they rod 2 back and go get a Reg Ice and they're kind of fine again. So it's really hard. We saw this first from Drew, I think, at Baltimore.
Yeah.
Where Drew played. I think it was 1 Reggie Steel as well.
Yes.
And yeah, it's just a really cheesy thing you can do with Reggie. I think it is probably the worst of the Reggies. I think Reggie Rock up there. Reggie Rock's pretty bad too, but maybe a little bit better. You almost never attack with Reggie Steel, to be honest. Up against Mew, there's like a time to use Reggie Steel to like 1 KO Mew V, but it like doesn't actually happen really.
Regirock has definitely decreased in value, I would say, since Arceus has kind of fallen out of the meta, but it is good against Stoutland, which can 1-hit KO Regieleki, right? So that gives you a response to Stoutland potentially. And I would say more so based on this event and maybe what won in Europe is it can 1-hit KO Vikavolt V.
Oh, true. Yeah. So so Registeel really is the worst because I mean Registeel can like KO stuff in Lost Box, but so can every other Reggie. So it really is it can KO Mew V. I guess that's the one thing Registeel can do. But that is the matchup that plays the most Lost City. So that's like the risky. So like you go up there, you KO their Mew V, and they go Lost City knockout, and you're like, all right, let's go to game 2.
Yeah.
Like
I think you don't care about that
rough.
as much because like that matchup is solid enough for Reggies, right? Just because, especially if you're rocking the 3 Gigas like Christian was. Did play a kind of interesting stadium lineup. The 2 Path to the Peak, 1 Pokestop, 1 Stormy Mountains. The very first iterations of Regigigas, I know, all played Stormy Mountains, and then eventually people played all Pokestops. Path to the Peak has kind of just been the one that has come in and out of decks and has ultimately become the more consistent and best choice for the like best finishing lists. It feels like,
Yep.
just because it has the most utility and it's really solid in the meta right now, where you've got Lugia that's really reliant on an ability. You've got Radiant Greninja in the Lost Box decks that's really reliant on getting set up. And
Yeah.
specifically for like our Lost Box deck, we only play one stadium. So if they're playing heavy Path to the Peak and counter your Pokestop, you're not going to be able to use Greninja, which is going to really limit your options.
Yeah, yeah. I'm actually not a huge fan of that. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the Storm Mounds plus the Pokestop. I think 4 path is like super good in Reggie.
Yeah,
I think
I
that's like
agree.
where a lot of your win condition comes against Lugia, especially when they have like Dunsparce or Manaphy and Dunsparce. Like you just need to be disruptive with slowing them down through the just maybe them not getting the summoning star until like a turn after, or having to put down like a Punkaboo to get there. Especially then if they don't have Manaphy, that becomes like easy prize cards for some Terra Spark damage later. And then even in the Lost Box matchups, super strong, and then also just really strong against Mew. Like sometimes Reggie just has a slow start, but being able to have the paths in the early game or in the mid game to stop Mew or any deck doing from whatever they want to do, I think is like a pretty big deal. So it's definitely one thing I'm not a big fan of here. Was rocking the Yell Horn. I'm a big fan of the one of Steel. I think it's super valuable space to try and find in the Reggie deck is to cut. And I think that might be something we kind of see as staple moving forwards. But if it does become a staple moving forwards, you could sit there when you go up against Reggie and be like, okay, what is the worst Reggie currently in the meta? It's like, all right, it's Reggie Ice. I'm gonna go KO the Reggie Ice here. Let's see if they play 1 or 2. So we can start to see that kind of
Yeah.
that like meta, the way the meta develops, the Reggie players cut one of their Reggie. I mean,
The
you'll never
Reggie
cut a
meta.
Lecky. You'll never cut a Gigas, a Lecky, or a Drago. So it's always going to be Steel, Rock, or Ice. That will be the one that's always cut. But yeah, also had the Yellhorning here. So was looking out for the potential of the Ice Q. Also, Yellhorn, like weirdly, is like also really good against Arceus Duraludon. And with less paths in the deck, you might have to be using like Sonar at some point to recover a path to actually get through the Duraludon. So even with 2 path, I think, and that's like another reason to play more path as well, right? The Duraludon matchup. But with even with 2 path, plus the Sonar from Bad Lucky, I think you're going to get there eventually. So yeah, Reggie making top cut wasn't a huge surprise for how well it did overall and kind of how
Yeah.
many people played it, to be honest.
Yeah, I played against 2 in day 1. How many did you play throughout the tournament? Did you play a couple?
I think I played against 3 total, three total Reggies. Yeah.
Yeah, I was definitely around without a doubt. And then the last deck in top 8 to mention is going to be the Lost Box, but not Kyogre Lost Box. It is the amazing Rayquaza Lost Box. And this was actually the best finishing Lost Box just overall when you look at the top
Yep.
32. There was 2 Kyogres, 2 people from our group, yourself, and then Isaiah Williams. But there were 3 people on the Rayquaza version of the deck, proving that it's obviously the better version, right, Azul?
Yeah, I don't know about that. The Rayquaza build, it just feels so awkward so often.
Yeah.
You got 5 energy types in there as opposed to the 3 or even 2 of the Sablezard, 3 in the Kyogre box. But I think that definitely is pretty solid overall. Like you hit really hard with Rayquaza. It is nice that it kind of answers all of your problems. That you have to try and come up with different solutions for those situations in something like the Sablezard or the Kyogre build. Rayquaza kind of like it's like, oh, I KO Stoutland. Oh, and I want to KO Lugia. But I feel like to get there is the hard part sometimes because you only have 4 Mirage Gates. You do have some Raihans, but for Rayquaza to 1-hit KO something like a Lugia, you do need 4 energy on the Rayquaza, which is if they're timing their Marnies correctly, it can definitely be a lot to get to sometimes. But yeah, I think it is
Raihan,
pretty solid
Gate,
overall.
Attach. Simple enough, bro. Come on now.
What happens if you do it again?
There's 3 Raihans in here. Come on now.
I definitely think it is. I think the Rayquaza build is probably a little bit better than I give it credit for personally. And yeah, I think it's solid over. Yeah, like I said, like Rayquaza just like answers all the situations, right? And also like just like we played a Drapion in the Kyogre build this week to beat Mewtwo V Union, which actually was the first thing I hit in round 1 of day 1 was a Mewtwo V Union deck.
Which is
And
funny
I
too,
yeah.
because you were talking about before the tournament, you said nobody in our group is going to use Drapion at all today. This is going to be the most useless card in the deck. And then you played against Mewtwo round 1.
Yeah. So yeah, Rayquaza answers all those situations, right? 1-hit KOs. It also gives you a better Arcturaludon matchup as well. I like a winnable Arcturaludon matchup if you have the Ray build, because the other builds, Sablezard can keep up with Arcturaludon sometimes, but it can be a lot to use Zard consistently that many times. But yeah, the Ray just kind of does everything, right? Just one shot, one shot, one shot. But it does come at the cost, I think, of being a little bit less consistent. Because
Sure.
pulling that thing off multiple times can be tough to do.
And that's really what kind of it feels like metas get to at a certain point, right? Early meta, people are just playing consistent versions of their decks, and then later on as things develop, People sacrifice consistency in favor of techs and things that can improve the matchups, which if they work, they improve your matchups, right? If you can beat things like the Archeops, which by the way was pretty popular at this tournament, more popular
Yep.
than it was at Toronto at least. It was pretty popular at this event. So if you can have something that turns a very, very bad matchup into a pretty decent one at the sacrifice of the consistency. Obviously, like you have to change the deck setup a whole lot if you're, changing from Sablezard or, Lost Box Kyogre. This is quite a different deck from either of those two things, right? But maybe it's worth it sometimes. And obviously, it worked out pretty well for Jacob in this tournament as he was able to make top 8.
Yeah. I actually think, thankfully, for all the haters who joined me, I think Archeops was probably the worst performing top deck at the tournament because there's like 5 in day 2. It looks like maybe, and it wasn't the top 6 decks. It was on the graphic. It was on the graphic. The the graphic they put on stream, Archeops was on the graphic, and there's like only a handful of them, a couple of them in day 2. So still rooting for Archeops downfall, and thankfully, the prophecy is coming true, and the deck continues to be a trap.
Grant Shin got 17th with it, just missing out on the top 16. But yeah, that's the best finishing one. The rest of them we got to scroll quite a bit ways
Yeah.
down here to
Saj
get to
did
it.
get 61st. Okay. All right.
Yep.
And then, a couple more in top 128. But yeah, rightfully where it should be, not too close to top 8. There's a couple in day 2, but yeah, not really pushing for a second place finish anymore. People know about it as a threat now. Don't worry. The Archeops will no longer be getting too many championship points.
So there was only one Mew VMAX in top 32, which is definitely
Yeah.
the worst performance from this deck. Since it came out, like it has to be, right? No shot that there's been
Probably,
less
yeah.
than one since it came out. Why is a powerful deck like Mew on
Or maybe when
just
there was one, it did really well. Like there was the one that won that European regional recently, right?
yeah, but was
Um,
it the only one in top 32? No way, right?
I don't know. I'm trying to look it up. It was the only one in top 8, right? Was it Leo
Well,
regionals?
yeah,
Yeah, it
but
was Leo. Well, yeah, we don't have the data for that one. It was the only one in top 8. It could have been the only one in top 32. I doubt it. But
yeah,
I don't know.
I doubt it, bro.
But it really was Drapion, right? There's
Yeah.
Drapion and Lugia. Like I feel like that matchup's already slightly favored for Lugia. The Mew matchup in general is like slightly favored for Lugia. Maybe it's just 50-50. We'll just call it a 50-50. And then people are like, it's a 50-50, but what if I add a Drapion, right? And like one of the incentives to add Drapion is the Mew matchup, right? Even if like you maybe wouldn't have thought about playing Drapion in your Lugia deck until Mewtwo V Union did so well. Once you're there and you're like, well, I kind of need this for Mewtwo V Union if I want to beat that. And you're like, and it helps my Mew matchup, right? It's a little bit of extra incentive. And then yeah, there was a lot of Drapion. I mean, I played Drapion. There was also the Rayquaza Lost Box. That has to be another reason as well, right? Because that sounds like a terrible matchup for Mew. Like anything that one hit KOs Mew that is worth 1 prize card, even Drapion being worth 2 prize cards is bad enough, right? And then you had like the Arceus Pika decks playing 2 Drapion, right? So like they were like, all right, I'm figuring out my Lugia matchup. All right, I got my Lugia matchup locked up. All right, and I'll add 2 Drapion for the for the Mew matchup, right?
Not
So yeah, it's just a lot of
losing to
Drapion.
Mew. Yeah,
Yeah, no
I mean,
one.
and that it goes back to what we talked about when Drapion first got revealed. Like, what a dumb card. A one
Yeah.
card inclusion to just vastly improve your matchup percentages against one of the more popular decks in the format. Like, I wonder what would this meta look like currently if Drapion just didn't exist, right?
I don't think it would change. Like Mew would be better, but Lugia,
I bet
without
it
it,
would
the Lugia matchup
decrease
is.
Lugia's meta share, like for sure. I
Well,
think Mew has
what
a
it,
decent matchup against Lugia.
the thing is, Lugia could just. The thing is, Lugia. Once again, this is the problem with Lugia. Lugia is so versatile. They would just add a dark Pokemon, and they'd be like, okay, I have a dark Pokemon now. They would play
Yeah,
2
but
hiding energy,
it's got to be
add
a
a
two
dark Pokemon
prizer,
that one
right? It's
hits.
got to be a two
No,
prizer.
Baby Moltres. There you go.
Yeah,
That we
sure.
saw
People
Baby
were
Moltres at
playing,
Toronto.
yeah.
Yeah. So like that's why Lugia's like Mew's dumb, but Lugia is like dumb because you could just do that anytime a problem presents itself. Lugia will be able to answer it. The trick is to always try and stay ahead of the problems before it becomes a problem, right? That's what you want to try and do, and that's a little bit harder to do than to answer the problems after they're identified as a problem. But I think the one situation where it actually feels like Drapion kind of balanced out the meta was Lost Origins format, where it felt like these decks were playing Drapion was an option, but Mew was still such a powerful deck, right? The DTE Mew, felt super powerful despite Drapion being in the format, right? So
Yeah.
that's actually is the kind of the format where I felt like Drapion almost felt like it balanced it out. Now I think Drapion's kind of overkill. Mew's not that good.
And then a couple other interesting decks to mention. We talked about the Arceus Duraludon. There was a Palkia in the top 32. Noah Yoshida, who I believe lost the winning in on the stream. So had a chance, didn't quite get in there though. And then we also see quite a few Eternatus VMAX in day two. None in top 32. Frank Persick did bubble top 32 at 33rd. So rips to Frank for sure. That is all. I've been there before. I've gotten the 33rd, so feels so bad to out of 1,200 players get 33rd and get nothing, where you had the same match points of someone who at least got $250. But yeah, interesting. Eternatus on the rise. Where did this come from, Azul?
I mean, all just came from the couple recent regionals last week.
In Asia.
Yeah, so we had the one in Taiwan where there was a Eternatus list that got top 8, but no one really seemed to adopted the more aggressive Umbreon build, and everyone kind of went to the build that got top 8 in Japan, the Weezing build, right? The 4-3 Weezing, and then Eternatus is kind of like the backup attacker. I think Frank's list actually even only played like a 3-2 Eternatus. Most people were probably rocking the 3-3.
Yeah, and they even had
I
a
think Frank
Drapion
was
in
on the
here
3-2.
still,
Yeah, and then you
which is so funny.
which it is funny, and that once again shows the power of Mew, because like actually the Mew matchup is unfavorable if they set up and you don't have Drapion, because they're just gonna go 2-2-2, and they kind of just win the game, or and they just kind of get ahead and potentially win the game and overrun you. Especially if they're playing the Meloetta build, then they just like win the game. So you kind of actually need Drapion to like be an aggressive like first. You get the first knockout, or they can even go like 2 on an Eternatus and then psychically a Crobat V and then KO a Crobat V on the following turn and don't leave a 3-pricer in play. So yeah, that kind of just shows the power of Mew there too. Even Eternatus decks, a full dark deck, literally no other Pokemon still rocks the Drapion. But yeah, the Weezing deck, I actually just don't think the Lugia matchup is that good. You have to put so much other stuff on your bench for your deck to function. They play 2 Serena, 2 Boss, which is actually one of the things we saw Lugia decks cutting back on, was people were going down to 1 Serena. I think we saw that in Liam's list, and a couple other lists in the top 8 that I was looking through didn't have the 4 gust effects. They were cutting down, getting a little greedy, I feel like, on the gusts and going down to just 2 Boss and a Serena. Which is actually curious to see, because we saw like going into the release of the set, where kind of everyone was talking about, oh, are you even going to play Boss anymore? Why wouldn't you just play Force Arena? And now we see people favoring the extra Boss and at least the Lugia deck over the extra Serena,
Which I
when
think
they are
makes
going down to
sense,
those
right? It
3.
just gives you more
Yeah.
utility, and there's so many one prize decks out there. Like, I mean, if
Hmm.
you only play Serena and your Lost Box Kyogre opponent benches Kyogre and puts a water energy on it, like nothing you can do about it, right?
Yeah, it's just there.
Yeah.
Actually, that's actually interesting, because I did that a lot against a lot of decks, because like nothing plays too much Boss right now. Even like the Lugia decks, once their Luminion is used and they used Boss they used it and they've already like burned a Boss or discarded a Boss, and the Luminion's been used, or they discarded Luminion, or even up against stuff like Reggie and stuff. I'm just gonna bench. You don't have. I don't think you have your last Boss in your hand. I'm gonna bench this Kyogre with a water, and now I need so much less when you hit me with the Marnie or the Roxanne or whatever later. So yeah, I did that a lot, where I would just kind of bench down my Kyogre with a water and be like, I don't think you have it. And even if you do, I have an ordinary rod, so I'll be okay.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's all the big decks to talk about. There were, quite a few other. I mean, as with every day too, there's going to be some wacky stuff out there. There was some Zoro box, some Beedrill stuff, Goodra Lost Zone box, but none of these really performed that well. This tournament was really all about, I think, Lugia bouncing back after
Yep.
a kind of a downward trend the previous tournament week. And we definitely have to give massive congratulations to Connor once again on getting the win. Largest regionals of all time.
Yep. Congrats to Connor. Moving on. We are talking about another regional championship that's coming up in a couple weeks, the San Diego Regional Championship. Nothing too specific about the event. The thing we're going to be talking about today is a little controversy around deck submission deadline for specifically, well, I guess not specifically the TCG, but maybe the event in whole, but specifically the adjustment to the Pokemon TCG's deck submission deadline. So the organizer actually didn't tweet out. And actually, I think this has been on something that's been on Arcanine for a while. But someone asked the organizer on Twitter, why does Decklist submission close at 8 p.m. the night before the event instead of 8 a.m. the day before at San Diego Regional? So every other regional so far this season, and pretty much every major event, deck submission closes for the Pokemon TCG usually around 8 a.m. the day of the tournament, right? So
Yep.
we play for regionals, we play on Saturday. So 8 a.m. on Saturday is when after that point you can no longer change your deck list. If you submit a deck, a day on Friday, the day before the tournament, then you can still change it up until 8 a.m. on Saturday. And for ICs, that would be Friday. The only time I can remember this is nationals,
Yeah.
not even NAIC
I feel like I remember an NAIC where they did
2014.
this.
Did they do it at an
I
NAIC?
think so.
Maybe they
I do
did.
remember this conversation coming up once again. It has happened very sparsely over the years, though. It's
I think it's
definitely
happened at Worlds before as well.
maybe
Worlds
that's what
Day,
I'm thinking
yeah,
of.
Worlds. No, I think it maybe has. Yeah, I think Worlds Day 1.
Yeah,
You have to submit your deck list on Thursday, and then you play on Friday.
I think that's
And
what
then
I'm thinking
for
of.
everyone who made it to day 2 of Worlds, and anyone who makes it from day 1 to day 2, you don't have to submit your deck list until Saturday morning. So it's not like an advantage for the day 2 players, but it's still kind of like a. It still kind of takes away a little bit from the natural order of things for deck list submission for everyone who's playing in day 1. But it did happen at Nationals one year, like 2014. I remember standing in line to check in the night before the tournament, and I was writing out my deck list on the floor while I was waiting in line because for some reason they were like, "Oh, and you have to submit your deck list the day before." So,
Throwback to the days of
um,
paper deck lists, man.
yeah. But this is kind of the problem with this. So they confirmed that okay, deck lists do have to be submitted at 8 p.m. on Friday, which I don't think anyone would really have a huge problem with if they had a good reason for it. With everything being digital now, not having to collect paper deck lists and all that stuff, it's so much easier to submit your deck list, right? But their reasoning for having the TCG players submit their deck list on Friday at 8 p.m. instead of Saturday at 8 a.m. Was this tweet: reminder to all competitors, deck lists and team lists must be submitted through rk9.gg by 8 p.m. Friday, January 6th, to avoid the first round loss. A clear announcement. A clear announcement. And I don't have to worry about typing the wrong time for one of the 3 games. So I think there is a reason behind them having to do this. Do they just do this for Pokemon Go every time, where it's like Friday instead of Saturday?
I don't know when it is for Pokemon
No.
Go. They are doing this is going to be the first regional championships for VGC, right? This will be
Yes,
the
and this is a
first
big catalyst for
regionals
this.
for Scarlet and Violet. This is a big deal. And I do think that there's some there's always going to be some headaches compared to like the TCG, especially where it's just as simple as like, writing down the card that you have in your list. It's not quite as simple in VG, I feel like, where you've got to lock a battle box, and which I don't even know if there is. I can't remember in Scarlet Violet like what the situation is, but um there's so much more that has to be done in the game to make sure that people don't like change their Pokemon around and stuff like that. Like, because you can
Yeah,
track if someone switches a card out of their deck, but you got to make sure make sure someone's not moving Pokemon around in their game, right? Changing out
yeah.
tech moves, TMing moves mid tournament and stuff like that. But so I
Yeah,
don't
so
know.
apparently the reason for this is that the video well the reason they apparently they want the video game players to submit the night before to make sure everything runs smoothly. That's
Yes.
what I saw somewhere in this. Is like to make sure things happen smoothly and we don't have a huge delay on the tournament. We're gonna have you submit at Friday at 8 p.m. to make sure that things go well. Right? We don't want to have a
Yep.
huge delay because something goes wrong and then we have to fix it and then the tournament's delayed like 3 hours. Right? But that is their reasoning because they're moving the video game deadline to Friday at 8 p.m. That's why they're also moving the Pokemon Go and the Pokemon TCG, unless they always did the Pokemon Go on Friday, but I don't think they did, and the Pokemon TCG to Friday at 8 p.m. instead of the normal Saturday at 8 a.m. because whoever's running the Twitter account doesn't want to have to worry about typing the wrong time for one of the 3 games, which I think is just that can't be a reason. That just can't. You have to come up with something better than that. I think if you have a fine reason, then it's fine. It's like, okay, well, it sucks because no one likes to submit their deck list that early before a tournament. But your reason can't be I don't want to. I don't want to set out the wrong time for one of the 3 games. It won't happen. Like let me do the tweet. I will tweet it for you. I'll take full responsibility. I won't mess it up. I can tweet out Pokemon Go and VGC deadline is Friday at 8 p.m. Pokemon TCG deadline is Saturday at 8 a.m. It's not hard. This can't be the reason. They have to have another reason. I think this is absurd, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a little crazy. And so one of the responses to this tweet was Jake Gearhart saying, "We're all paying $70 for entry. Respectfully, you should have to worry about typing the wrong time for one of the 3 games, and you should get it correct, right?"
Yeah.
And this kind of just comes with charging a premium for something, right? I mean, granted, this is like, a premium hobby, right? A premium game to play, whatever you want to say. And but when you're charging that much money for something, there is a higher standard expected of you. So having the excuse of we didn't want to mess it up is kind of just silly, for
You could mess
sure.
anything up. Like, what is that? You should just not run the event because you could mess up the event. You shouldn't run the event. You
I
shouldn't
didn't
tweet
want to
ever
pay
again.
around one because I was scared I would click the wrong button.
Like, yeah, you could do any of that could happen, right? And I think, I mean, the standards have been set, right, for so many years now. Every regional this season, every regional last season, I think some of them were maybe at 8:30 you could submit your deck list by, but it's whatever. That's 30 minutes different, right? It's been like 8 to 8:30 a.m. Saturday, the morning before the event, or for the ICs, it was Friday at 7:30, 8 a whatever, around that time
Yeah.
that you could submit your deck list. If this wasn't such like a standard where every other event is doing it this way, it wouldn't be a problem, I don't think. Has Team Northwest even ran an event this season? They did 1-1, right?
Yeah, they did Salt Lake.
Yeah, Salt Lake. And at that one, decklist submission was 8 a.m. on Friday. Like, I don't know. I just feel this can't be the reason. If you had a good reason, if you had a solid reason, I think it'd be fine. I don't think anyone would have a problem with it. But if this is your reason, is you don't want to by accident type the wrong time for one of the three games, that just feels so absurd. Like, it seems like they have a solid reason for moving the video game from the morning of till the evening before, but that's not a good
Yeah.
reason to adjust the TCG's schedule. Or I don't like, once again, Pokemon Go, I actually don't know if they usually are Friday or Saturday. I actually have no idea. I'm just assuming it was probably Saturday morning as well, though. So, um, yeah, I mean, that's kind of all I have to say. And I don't know if you have any final words on that one.
Yeah, I mean, oh, what was I about to say? I did have something I wanted to say. Oh, why this is a big deal, right? Like, why do players care about submitting at 8 a.m. versus 8 p.m. the night before? And it's like those last few hours of testing are where like lots of
Yeah.
key decisions get made. And especially when you have people traveling to your event from all over the country and even all over the world sometimes, right? Like people are coming from everywhere to play in these regional championships. And if decklist submission is at 8 p.m. on Friday, you're going to have people who are on planes at 8 p.m. on Friday. So they're going to have to submit even earlier than that. So many people work with teammates that live in different states than them, and they use that night before the tournament to try to iron out the last couple of card changes they want to make sure they have in their deck before the event starts. And now that is just being gone. And for me personally as well, that's one of my favorite times in the Pokemon TCG is the night before in the hotel room, busting out the ironing board from the hotel room, playing games, trying to figure out what is this last 60th card. All right, getting into the lab and figuring out the perfect deck. And now you just got to figure it out, I guess, the week before, which, I mean, it is what it is. And maybe nobody would care about this as well if it had always been Friday night. Like this would
Right.
not be a
Yeah.
story, right? But
Yeah.
the fact that it's always been 8 a.m. Saturday and now they're changing it for this reason of all things, it's just really not acceptable. I don't feel
Yeah,
like. I don't know.
I think it's unacceptable for the most part, and I think there should be a pretty big fuss about it. And it is a kind of like it's really not that big of a deal, right, in the grand scheme of things, as far as like other problems I think we have in Pokemon. But I
Sure.
think it is something that's worth being brought up and just no, like yeah, like I mean, I feel like yeah, it's just such a bad reason. That is the only reason we care to talk about it. Is it's such a bad reason to it's such a bad reason to adjust the time of when you can submit your deck list. It's like comical almost.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
it is what it is, and players are just going to have to adjust. I'm worried that people are going to get like round one losses because they didn't submit their list
yeah,
on
yeah.
Friday night. That's definitely going to be something that happens. So hopefully enough people read the Arcanine page to know that is the time for the submission. Also, like this announcement came in the replies of a Twitter thread. It's not even on their like actual Twitter feed. So
Yeah.
there's a chance that people didn't even see it. And there's probably going to be 1,000 people playing in this tournament, and there's just over 1,000 people that follow them over on Twitter. So it's like not even necessarily everyone who is playing in the tournament is going to have seen any of these things. But
Yeah, I think it's like almost more likely that even if they had tweeted out that Pokemon TCG decklist submission had to be done by 8 p.m. Friday when it was actually 8 a.m. Saturday, it's more likely with it actually being 8 p.m. Friday, that more people are likely to mess up their decklist submission and miss it just because they're so used to just having to put it in the morning of, or they're not going to remember before they get on their flight and they're going to land at like 9 p.m. And then not have a decklist submitted and then not have a deck in the tournament, right?
Yeah,
I think
and you
it's
get
more
around one
likely.
loss.
Yeah, I think it's more likely that people just because of this, it's going to be a mess up. So I guess it's a good thing we're bringing attention to it. With us bringing attention to it, hopefully they change it. But also now more people are going to know about it. So make sure you tell your friends or anyone who you know is going to the event. It does say it on the RK9 page, but yeah, they haven't even put out. And with this like being so different from every other regional, I feel like they should have put out an announcement saying for our upcoming regional, and maybe they will. They're still 2 weeks away. They could definitely make an
Sure,
announcement, right? And
sure.
hopefully they do make an announcement and be like, remember deck list submission for the Pokemon TCG, even though it's different than previous regionals. Is going to be the day before at 8 p.m. Hopefully they make an announcement saying they're adjusting it to Saturday at 8 a.m. But we'll see.
That would be ideal, but we'll see what happens. But we can move on from there to everyone's favorite segment of the podcast, Guess That Flavor Text, where each week Azul or I will pick a card, read off that flavor text, the little bit of text in the bottom right hand corner of the card, and the other host will try to guess what that Pokemon is. If you get it right without any lifelines, you get 4 points, and there are 3 lifelines you can use. For each one you use, you do lose the opportunity to earn one of those points. And those 3 lifelines, of course, as always, are what set the card is from, what stage the card is, and read an attack name. It is Azul's turn to pick a card for me to guess. I do believe I am leading right now, so this could be a good opportunity to extend that lead. I do need to go back into the scoreboard and update it, though, because it's been a while. I don't remember exactly where we are, but I'm pretty sure I'm up at least 1 point.
Yeah. All right, Chip, you ready for this week's flavor text?
Let's get it, buddy.
If this Pokemon senses a strong emotion, it will run away as fast as it can. It prefers areas without people.
My first thought immediately is like Stuffle or Beware is what I want to say. I think that sounds similar. I feel like I've maybe read this before. I'm going to need to use some lifelines for sure. Let me just hear the text one more time.
If this Pokemon senses a strong emotion, it will run away as fast as it can. It prefers areas without people.
I mean, this definitely gives me strong, like, Route 1 Rattata Pokemon type vibes, right? Like, it's like the classic Route 1 early game normal type Pokemon, maybe like a Sentret or something like that even. I'm going to use some lifelines here, though. Let me go with what stage the card is.
It is a basic.
And then I'll also do what set the card is from.
Well, actually, you know what? To be honest, I actually have to look that up because
You never have it pulled up correctly.
well, I have the card pulled up, but I just see the set symbol.
And that means nothing to you.
Hold up. It is.
You should just
help me.
You need to just pull it up on PKM and cards every week when you read it off.
Okay, yeah, actually, let me do that real fast.
Where did you go to look for it?
It just happened, you know what I'm saying?
Where were you looking? Okay.
Hang on.
Oh my
All right,
gosh.
I've got it. It is. Wait, what'd you guess for the set, right?
Yeah, what set the card is from?
From Chilling Rain.
All right, I'm gonna go with Stuffle.
Is not. It is.
Wait. Read the attack name for anyone playing along at home.
Yeah, for anyone playing along at home, we're gonna give you that third one if you haven't guessed it already, which is a super easy one to guess. I can't believe Chip messed this one up.
Oh my gosh.
Attack is Psyshot.
Okay, so if I had gone with that, I would have known.
I feel like it's always safe to exhaust.
Oh, is
them
it Ralts?
No.
Okay.
You're on track though. I'll give you one. We'll just do one more before I read it off.
For funsies,
it only has one attack as well, if that helps.
Yeah, I don't know. Just go ahead and give it.
It's Hatena.
Oh yeah, so easy, bro. Who could forget the classic Pokemon Hatena?
Yeah, everyone's favorite, a go-to, a staple in the Pokemon TCG.
Oh my gosh.
Hatena. Many cards are going to come. More Hatenas in the future for sure in future sets. You already know what it is. All right, moving on. Next thing we're going to talk
Azul,
about.
Wait.
Oh, go ahead.
I will Venmo you $5 if you can tell me what Hatenna evolves into without looking it up. Don't look, don't look. You looked at your
No,
screen.
I'm not. No, but it's not on my screen anymore. I've already closed the page. I'm looking at the next thing we're going to talk about.
What does Hatenna evolve
Hatenna.
into?
Well, I know the stage 2 is Hatterena or Rini.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the hat one. The stage 1 is. Well, it's got to be something with a hat. It starts with an H. I don't know. Hatton.
Hatterene.
Oh, Hatterene. And what is the stage 2 is Hatterini?
Oh, sorry, no. Sorry, yeah, Hatterem. Hatterem is the stage 1. I forgot.
Oh, Hatterim. Okay, yeah.
Hatterem into Hatterene. My bad.
So the first one is
Hatenna.
like antenna, but a hat.
Yes.
The other one is Hatterim, like a hat, like the rim of a hat.
I guess. Yeah.
Yes. And then the last one is Hatterene, which is the reen of a hat.
I don't know.
I mean, is the hat Pokemon, right?
It is.
If anyone out there makes hats, what is Hatterini referring to with the Reenie?
Yeah, what does the Rini mean? What is the
What is
the
that?
base of the word? Yeah.
But it's hat. It's hat rim, not hat. Oh, but it is hat rim. Yeah, I mean, it's like rim. Or maybe we're just like being really like hat
Oh
rim
my
has nothing to do
gosh.
with rim. Hatenna has nothing to do with an antenna. But the hat on Hatenna's head does kind of look. It doesn't even look like a Hatenna, like an antenna. It looks like a party hat with a bubble on top.
Well,
All
from
right.
there, before this devolves any further, let's move on to our next topic. Actually, just something we did want to mention really quick. A little bit of news. Pokemon did announce what the World Championship decks are going to be this year. So, for anyone who doesn't know, every single year, Pokemon releases the World Championship decks, which are pre-constructed, pre-made decks featuring cards and lists from players who placed well at the previous World Championships. And these are really fun to collect and to have, to be able to go back and revisit old formats. Like I've got most of the World Championship decks that have been printed over the years, ever since the first ones back in 2004. It's a very cost-efficient way to build these decks as well. They do have different card backs, so you cannot use these alongside regular cards generally, but it's just a nice way to like commemorate the deck. And it's also kind of a badge of honor for a Pokemon player to have had a deck made of something you played at Worlds. Very, very cool. So obviously, Andre Scooball's ADP deck, Arceus Decidui Flying Pikachu deck. Very, very cool name there. We've got Andre Chiasson's The Shape of Mew, little reference to good old Ed Sheeran, I would imagine. We've got Ice Rider Palkia from Rikuto Owashi, who won in the juniors division, and then in the seniors division, we have Sebastian Lashmet's Cheryl again, Rapid Strike Urshifu deck.
Yeah. So the Worlds decks, it is kind of unfortunate. Even if you win Worlds, unless you're in the Masters division, you don't get your deck printed every time. So
Like
they always print them.
guaranteed,
Yeah, they always print the Masters division first place deck, right? Always, right? They always do that, which
yes.
does make sense. But then it kind of stinks, I guess, for the other divisions a little bit because your deck is not guaranteed to be printed. They printed the juniors division champion deck, but because the juniors division champion deck was a Palkia deck, they did not print the seniors division champion deck. So they didn't want to print two Palkia decks. So Liam, unfortunately, who we just talked about, who just got top 8, unfortunately did not get their Worlds deck printed yet. Instead, Sebastian got it with the Urshifu because you got to switch it up. They're not trying to print, if Palkia had won every division, they're not trying to print 4 Palkia decks. So they do try and switch it up and try and have a better representation of the meta at Worlds, but also like powerful decks throughout the year. So I think Urshifu is pretty fitting, to be honest. So Sebastian kind of did them a favor by getting second with Urshifu, to be honest, because that was really fitting for the year, the format throughout the year, right? Or like Urshifu was super powerful, didn't really have its time at IRL events, right? Like it didn't really get to showcase its stuff too much. I guess there was like the no, that's not true. There was like the Urshifu
won
box.
EUIC.
Yeah. It was a long time ago. So yeah, it was cool to see Urshifu get in there for sure. And then of
Robin
course
won
Mew,
regionals with it as well.
yeah. Of course Mew, Arceus, and Palkia being like the 3 most dominant Pokemon up until Lugia, all getting a deck as well. So yeah, it's super cool. And I think they're doing it a little bit different than we've seen them do it in the past. So usually the back of the cards are, the world's theme and logo and whatever. But this year they're different colors. So like the Mew one is purple, the what one is green? Arceus one is green. The
No,
Arceus one is green.
the
Yeah.
Urshifu one is green.
No, the
No,
Urshifu one
no,
is
it's the Arceus
brown
is green. I'm
or
sorry. Yeah,
orange.
yeah,
Yeah. And then the Poké one is blue. So that's kind of cool. Doing like a little bit of like a theme for each of the decks, I guess, a little, or changing up the color scheme at the very least, which gives them, a little bit more uniqueness to each of them, which is cool.
yeah. Definitely cool. I am a fan. These are definitely worth picking up for $15 as well because they usually only
Yeah.
print them once, and then once they sell out, they don't make them anymore. So I mean, even the older ones are, hold their value pretty decently, and it's a great way and a cheap way to be able to go back and remember formats. Now, whether or not this is a format you want to go back and remember, I guess that's up to you. There
I
is
think I think
some fun decks, but I
definitely a better collector's item than like an
yeah.
item that's worth breaking out and play. I want to go back and play that 2022 World Championships format. That format was awesome. There was
Yeah, I mean,
Palkia and Pikachu could beat it. Let's go.
I've busted out and played, I would say, all of the world's decks at some point, just for a couple games. Like, I've played the 2018 ones, the 2019 ones, and there's problems with all of these
Well, those
formats,
are
but
better.
hmm,
Those are definitely better than this. This was bad. I think this Worlds was a this might have been this is probably the worst Worlds format I have ever played in. This was a terrible format.
I
Like
think
it was bad.
2012 is up there, is pretty bad as
What was
well.
that one? No,
Darkrai.
but that was not this bad. There was so much
It was Darkrai
more.
CMT.
It was different though because the because of like the way that the game is played now with like the information share and stuff. Well, maybe Darkrai was a pretty high percentage of the meta. I don't remember it being that high. I wasn't at that
It was
Worlds.
pretty high.
Um,
I
I don't
wasn't
remember
there
how I
either,
don't know how
but
high it
yeah.
was. I don't think we had those stats back then. No one knew. You have to have someone going around with a pen and paper and like counting individually
Yeah.
uh, what every deck was. Yeah, I enjoyed that format personally overall. There wasn't really many decks. Yeah, it was just Eels, Darkrai, and CMT. But I mean this is the worst Worlds format I've played in because I didn't play in 2012 Worlds. So yeah, this was bad. I think this was bad. This is definitely by far the worst Worlds format I've ever played in.
They can't all be winners, I guess.
No, they can't. They can't. There's got to be bad to be good, right? And hopefully we get to something better for the next World Championships. We're going to show up to the Worlds at 2013 or 2023 is going to be 75% Lugia or something like that.
Yikes. And then the last thing we wanted to talk about on this week's episode is the current prizing structure in Pokemon tournaments. So we talked about this a bit over the
Yeah.
last few weeks. I mean, but it just feels like a topic that keeps coming up because there keep being reasons that the current structure is bad, right? Like we just had the
Hmm.
largest regional championships of all time. There were 1,200 masters at this event, and you had to finish in the top 32 to get any sort of prize money, and you had to finish in the top 64 to even get any booster packs. And I think the biggest issue, I don't think you would see so many people complaining or like as upset about it if maybe they just cut straight to top 64 into day 2, right? And then everyone who
Yeah.
is playing in day 2 at least gets something. But you've
Yeah.
got so many people who are playing in day 2. There were 130 people participating in this day 2. So that means there will be a bunch of people who just finished with top 128, which is just 40 championship points. And then you're going to have 2 people who played in day 2 who played an additional 6 rounds. 2 people are going to get top 256 points, which means they get no packs, absolutely nothing at all, and they get 30 championship points, which is less than what you get for getting second place at a league cup.
Yeah, I don't know. So like it's kind of weird to think, but it's like I mean, I guess like you could always look at the argument as like, okay, but if you show up to day 1 and you go 0-4, you get nothing, right?
Well, yeah.
But so I guess like are we trying to say like for the achievement of making it to day 2, it
Yeah.
would feel nice to, and I guess I kind of agree with that, especially because I feel like Pokemon, and we've kind of talked about this as well, of like being like the bar for getting your worlds in Pokemon is not that high. The bar for getting your worlds invite in Pokemon is really not that high in comparison to just like other competitive stuff like in the world. But we think that I think that's fine. I think it's fine for Pokemon to be a little bit more casual competitive for the most part, give majority of people who want to take the game a little bit more seriously the chance to get their world's invite. If you go a little bit further than that, you will like almost guaranteed to get your world's invite as long as you put in the time and effort. And it almost feels like that would be kind of maybe the same thing with this kind of day 2 thing, where it's like if you make day 2, I think at the very least, if you make day 2, there should be like a CP minimum, right? It should be like CP should basically go. There's CP for 128 for 256, but there's also just like day two CP. So like the two players who got 29th and 30th or 129 130th should also just get top 128 CP, right? I feel like that's not something that's hard to do.
Shouldn't
Um,
be in theory, right?
yeah. And then for the pricing stuff, I guess it changes a little bit. There's like a lot of things to like talk about with that. A majority of people feel like they want to see the pricing because the pricing has been the same for I don't how many years now? Five,
Since
6,
2016, so the 2017 season.
6 years. So the pricing has been the same for 6 years, but entry fees have gone up. I mean, is inflation a good reason to increase the prize payout for
I mean, the
Pokemon
real
tournaments?
thing is that they don't have to give us anything, right? Like,
Yeah,
there doesn't have to be a prize at the top. And for a long time, there wasn't. At regional
yeah,
championships, you got a few booster boxes if you won the event, right? And like a 1 or 2 round buy at U.S. Nationals. That was like
yeah,
like what you got for doing well at regional championships, which is like fine and was good enough for all those years. But I think once they introduced money into the game, there was just massive growth, maybe more than they expected. Honestly, regional championships went from having 300 players at them to having 700 players at them regularly,
yeah,
and now we're looking at regionals over 1,000 players for like. Has every regionals this season in the
yeah.
U.S. had over 1,000 players at it?
Yeah, over 1,000 players, and I think the tournament cap has capped every time. Like we've hit
Yeah.
the cap every time. I think even if it's taken some of them have taken a little bit more than the first 10 seconds of registration opening, or quite a bit more than that. Like it's still capped every single time. I'm pretty sure. So we're definitely showing interest, and we're filling up the tournaments, and we are paying the extra entry fee despite the entry fee increase. We're still paying it with that many more players showing up. I feel like there should be a prize increase at some point. Like I feel like the prizes should just increase. Like I would like to see everything kind of filled out. Like ideally, like if I could like pick where it should go from here personally. Maybe you don't have to increase the first place prize pool, but even like I think just making things a little bit, it would also just like give you a little bit of feels better for placing so well, or giving you something else like I kind of play for. Like if you make day two, there should be like a day two championship point minimum. I think it just feels really bad to be those those bottom few in those kind of situations. And then yeah, I mean it'd be nice to see them bring back the top 64 payouts. We had that the first year
Yeah.
of the prize increase. So bring that back, bring back the 250, top 32 becomes 500, top 16 becomes 750. And then maybe you increase the top eight. Maybe the first place player still stays at 5,000, but maybe you can get up to like 7,500. I don't know. That'd be nice. We kind of took a look at Magic tournaments before this and just took a look at how their basically regional equivalent tournaments um, pay out. And they pay out top 64, and they even pay out further down to like top 100 and top 128 based on attendance. So if they got like 3,000 plus players. And I think that's what it should be for Pokemon as well. I think if we get over 1,000 players, that's where we should see the prize increase, right?
Yeah, dropping it
Or
down
even
to
if
top 64 at least, or like
yeah, even if they
boosting
want to
first
set
place
the
by a little bit.
even if they want to set the bar to 1,500 players, but actually get if they want to boost, if they want to set the bar to once we get 1,500 players at a regional, we'll increase prize payout by whatever. If they want to do that, even that's fine. But first, they have to give us the venue space so we can actually, sign up 1,500 players, right? I would be fine with that if they wanted to be like, all right, we're going to do prize increases at 1,500 players for regionals going forwards. I think everyone would love that, and as long as the venues can support 1,500 players, I think we could maybe not this season, maybe not next season, but the season after, I think we could definitely be filling that because the game has been growing,
Well,
right? We talked about the huge growth when the first 5K regional started, but
yeah.
even like this last couple of years, the game has seen huge growth still.
I mean, I think if you put more money up top, there will be more people that come and play, like
That
undoubtedly.
as well, yeah,
So I think like you would see instant growth almost if
yeah,
they implemented it next season. It would definitely increase, but we'll see what happens. I think almost the thing that feels worse, and maybe someone on this call can kind of attest to this, is being someone who finishes with 35 match points, a record of 11-2-2, the exact same record as the person who's the 8th seed going into cut, and they get 9th place. They get $500 and 2 booster boxes, and that's it. They only lost 2 games at a 1,200 person tournament, and that's what they come away with.
yeah. So there definitely needs to be. So I got 9th this weekend, 35 points. Someone also got 10th with 35 points, and then there was 3 people with 35 points, I believe, in cut at 6, 7, 8. So, I mean, I've talked a lot about this about with a lot of other, top players, and it's not only the opinions of top players that matter, but they're obviously going to be in these positions more often than most people, where they're on the cusp of getting top eight or playing towards top eight throughout a day two, and it feels like you do have to work really, really hard to get. I went 5-1 in day two, and even at that point, I still whiffed top eight. Right, so I
That's
came into day
crazy.
two, took one loss, only one loss, which in the past has been like the extremes almost it felt like sometimes because I feel like in the past you could go like 4-1 in day two or 4-1 it would be and of course and I came in with a little bit better record than most people. I came in at 6-1-2, which is a pretty big difference. That 1 point is like huge. So I came in at 6-1-2, went 5-1, and then I got ninth place, right, which sucks. And it feels like, I mean, if they want to make the tournaments as hard as possible, that's fine, I guess, right? And that's kind of up to the Pokemon to decide how hard they want it to be for people to progress throughout a tournament, right? The bar was set quite a while ago of okay, 6-2-1 is how you make day two, or top 32. But then now all of our regionals are so big, it's just 6-2-1, right? You get 6-2-1. That's the bar to make it to day two, which I think is a pretty reasonable one. I actually think that's pretty reasonable. But now the next question has become: has these tournaments have gotten bigger and bigger, and we haven't seen an adjustment from the day two to top eight change, it's becoming harder and harder to make top eight, right? And the question just becomes, okay, at what point, like, do we have to get 3,000 players and then have it be, and then if they kept it at 6 rounds, we'd have like, I mean, that would just be ridiculous, right? I don't even know what would happen if we had that kind of situation. It'd be like only the players who are like almost undefeated making it to top eight, right? And even then, you might have some people bubbling, right? So if we get so many more players, it's just going to get worse. So at some point, they have to adjust the system, right? Whether it be an extra round, 7 rounds in day two, once we each reach a certain number of players. Maybe they already have a plan for this. We just haven't hit the numbers yet. The solution I think is probably better is probably asymmetrical cut. I think asymmetrical cut solves all the problems of still giving an advantage to the higher seeds while also making it less difficult to acquire that top cut spot. So
Yeah.
in this situation specifically, myself and the 10th place player would have played against the 7th and 8th place player. We'd have played around. The winners of those games would have made it into top eight, and then top eight plays out from there. And this also still gives an advantage to the higher seeds because they don't have to play that play in round. Another thing I think they should do, and I was hoping they would have actually done that going into this season, is I really think that the higher seed going into top eight should be able to pick who goes first or second and give some kind of advantage to the higher seed. So asymmetrical cut would do that as well. But I also think on top of that, the higher seed should get to pick if they go first or second in the match. And that would also make it better for those players who are actually the top eight playing into the symmetrical situation. Like if I played against the 8th seed as the 9th seed, they would pick to go if they want to go first or second in the first game, and then we'd play out for whoever loses from there gets to pick.
So I know
So those
that's
are the
something.
two adjustments I'd like to see.
Yeah. So an asymmetrical cut is also something they did at Worlds this year. We literally saw
Yep.
that where Sunday or Saturday morning of Top Cut being played, they literally had a play-in round as the first one, 8th versus ninth
Mhm.
seed, Otavio versus Cal Connor, and Otavio ended up winning that one. So I mean, I don't know. I think that was probably like a trial run at Worlds. Like, okay, do we like this? Do the people like it? Do the players like it?
We
Can we
all like it.
implement this moving forward? And the answer is yes. Everyone likes it. Let's implement it. But it doesn't
But they've
move
done
that
this trial run
quickly.
before, though.
They
They did
did
this at
do it, yeah.
Anaheim
Mhm.
at the Open. They've done it at the Open multiple times, actually, I think, where they've done asymmetrical cut at the Opens. But they still have not implemented it to the majority of the major tournaments, unfortunately.
Yeah, so maybe that'll be a change next season. I do want to talk about your idea of like
Mhm.
the higher seed getting to choose who goes first or second. That is something that they do in Magic the Gathering, I believe.
Yep.
But I
Mhm.
think that Magic is a little bit slower of a game compared to Pokemon, and obviously I think that whoever goes first is going to have an advantage. But I wonder if it's as big of an advantage in Magic as it is in Pokemon, because right now in Pokemon, going first is a pretty massive advantage for most decks, right? I mean, especially like if you're
Yeah.
talking about something like the Lugia Mirror, right? So, would doing something like that, letting the first player, the first seed player, just be too high of a advantage for them, or is it an earned and deserved advantage because they have that higher seeding?
I guess that's a decent question. I mean, either way, it still comes down to like a 50-50 after that. So, like, even if they didn't get the pick, it's still a 50-50. And then 50% of the time, they just go first anyways. And then they're still winning because they went first, maybe, right? But I don't think Pokemon is dictated too much by who goes first or second overall in the grand scheme of things. Like you
Sure.
still see the best players doing the best, right? And they are theoretically only going first 50% of the time. So I think it's a deserved. It's also just like when you get into those later rounds where people are just kind of IDing at the top table. It's not that there's anything wrong with that. I think that's fine. I don't, but I would like to like sit down, as like a table one, table two, and day two, and I could ID. Or maybe I want to play that out because it's like a decent matchup for me, and maybe I want them in cut, or maybe I want to be first seed so that when I play against anything else that's not them in cut potentially, I get to pick to go first or second depending on the matchup and have that advantage instead, right? So I think it's just something that should be in the game because like just first seed in Pokemon does not matter. The idea is that you get to play against the eighth seed. So theoretically, there may be a worse player or playing a worse deck because they're not first seed. But everyone knows throughout the amount of RNG that's in a card game, being first seed or eighth seed going into top cut just does not matter. It just doesn't matter. No one thinks it matters. I mean, I can't think of anyone who thinks it matters. It's probably just that the person who's first seed probably ran the hottest in day two or on day one and went like 9-0 or something, right? Like it's probably all that it really means.
I think something else that they could definitely do that would just make it feel better for anyone is like add top 32 placement cards or top 8 placement cards
Oh
at
yeah.
least. Like take the regional promo and just put a little stamp on it that says top 8 or champion or just add a
Yeah.
little something extra.
I feel
I
like
mean,
every other card game has that as well. They have
yeah,
promo cards for placements.
and Pokemon has that for their higher level tournaments as well. They've got it for the World Championships, and they've got it for the International Championships.
Yeah.
Starting at top 8 at least. At Worlds, they start at top 32. You can get the top 32 promos, but um, yeah, I mean, I would love to see that happen. And it feels, I mean, that seems like such a low cost thing that they could do that would just
Yep.
like appease a lot of people. It just adds a little bit of something else you get that's probably going to be a little valuable. You can sell it if you want to, or you can keep it to commemorate your tournament run, which is probably what most players will do anyway, right?
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely something. I feel like there's just something missing in the general prize payout structure currently, and then also for the qualification for top eight at these tournaments. I think asymmetrical cut fixes everything. On top of that, I would like to see the first seed gets to pick going first or going second, or higher seed, I should see. It's not just first seed, the
Yeah.
higher seed is a pick going first, going second throughout top cut. But I think but asymmetrical cut adds a little bit to that as well, because then if you have a higher seed, you don't have to play in, right? You don't have to play in that play in round. But so yeah, I think there's like two things they need to fix. Is one is just the process from day two to the next round to top eight just feels like it's missing something. And I'm not just saying this because I did just get I just get bubble or did just end up
Get
with a record
ninth.
as a
Yeah.
someone else in top eight. I've done this. This happened to me multiple times. And I've sometimes been the player who gets in over the other players. And if I had to play against one of them to keep my spot, I don't think that would be a bad thing either, right? So I've been the player who's been in over other players at the same record. And I've been the player who's been out, and I think in either situation, I think it would be fine for me to have to play. And the other solution, other two solutions for that specifically would be to do a seventh round in day two. That would make things a little bit cleaner, or to do a top 16, to cut to a top 16. The reason I
Yeah.
don't like the cutting
That's
to top
another
16
option.
as much is because it does kind of take away the value of being a higher seed, right? Like if you're first seed and you lose to the 16th seed and end up top 16, that feels kind of bad. But I think that would still be a reasonable solution. And especially once you know you're playing towards a top 16, you'd kind of get used to like the overall value of being a higher seed not being worth as much or not carrying as much, I guess, as well. But like right now the it currently switching to that would feel pretty bad, I guess.
I mean, before there was day 2 Swiss, they used to just cut to like top
Yeah.
64, right? Back in
Yeah, they just
regionals
use
at
a
top
big cut.
32, right?
It
Is
was
that
top
how it was for
128
your
at
first
the
regionals that you won?
yeah, we cut to top 32, I think, at the
Yeah.
first regional. It was top 32 or top 16. And like the first nationals I went to, we cut to top 128. They just took the top 128 players and then you just played. And there was no guaranteed record to make it there either. It was just the players they just cut off at the person who was at 128, and that's it. And then they played from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, as always, it's like there feels like there's room for improvement. It feels sad whenever it's just been stagnant for the last couple of years, and maybe we'll see that
Yeah.
adjust and
That's probably the
change
biggest thing.
next season. But I mean, I feel like those are words that we say like every season.
I
It's
think they
like
gotta change with these two things. I think they gotta change something next season, right?
hopefully, and I'm thinking that
Mid-season would be cool, but I feel like at the
yeah,
very least they gotta do something by next season for sure.
it's very rare that they do stuff like that mid season. I do think that I mean there is I don't know I remember back to the 2018 season or 2017 season, I think it was, where they adjusted the world's qualification
16.
halfway. It
Oh,
was
that, yeah.
they adjusted the world's qualification halfway through the year. Like I feel like we could potentially see something like that happen this season because I don't know that I think in their mind there's a number of players they want to be at Worlds, and I wonder if they're on track for that right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be. I mean, it's in Japan this year, so a ton of players who like are close to getting their Worlds invite and stop playing for it or get their Worlds invite probably won't go. It's like it's not gonna be as reasonable of a trip to something like London for like North American players, or I don't even know how. I don't
European
know.
players
Yeah,
even.
or European players, right? So like obviously for the Japanese players, it'll be pretty easy. And for Australia, I think it's pretty reasonable as well to get to Japan, right? It's not that far. I don't know how expensive it is flying out of Australia. I think in general it's just expensive. So, with that in mind, you want to make it like give a higher opportunity for players to get their invites because you want like a certain number of players there to represent the other regions besides Japan, right? So even if it means making the invite a little bit easier this year, overall as we start to work through the rest of the season, it's not a bad thing, right? Because they want you because like some players, some people might get their invite but not be able to go by the time Worlds comes around, or not plan to go but still just want to get their invite. But they also want people who get their invite and then also go. So we'll see what that ends up looking like. And League Cups and League Challenges should be coming back next season, right? I even saw I think I saw someone tweet out yesterday, like pictures of like official league stuff.
Yeah, I think stuff's starting to go out, so I feel like it's gonna come back maybe quarter 3, right?
Yeah, quarter three
Maybe
makes
Scarlet
that was my
Violet release,
prediction.
maybe all speculation at this point, but
Yeah.
hopefully.
Yeah, we'll see.
How many players do you think in the U.S. have their Worlds invite right now?
After, well, I guess we don't have what's called points uploaded yet, do we?
No, I don't think it'll change, but one though, from what I can see.
Players with their invites right now, I'm gonna guess 7.
5
That's close.
North American players, and I think
Yeah, North
after
American players.
this
I
tournament
mean,
gets
there's so
added,
many
it'll be
There's so many
6.
Europeans with their invite on now already, bro. They only
Yeah,
need
but they have so
350.
many. Like they have
No,
less
I'm just
points they
joking.
need to
I'm just
get.
joking. I'm just joking.
Okay.
That's my joke. They only need 350, bro. There's so many Europeans with players. It's Europeans with invites.
Actually, it's only 11, so it's like not
Yeah,
even
no,
that many more.
no, it's not. No, it's not. No, I was just joking. Yeah, they have way less regionals than us, so it's a
Yeah, makes sense.
little bit harder for them to have already. There's that hasn't been as much CP kind of put out over there.
But
Um,
well, I think that's going to do it for this week's episode, Azul. Unless you have any other thoughts, any other closing statements.
no, I think that's it. Yeah, those are the two things. Like to see them change. Hopefully, they'll change it sometime soon. But yeah, go ahead, send us out shit.
Yeah, thank you all so much for listening. As always, if you did enjoy, we would appreciate you showing your support by leaving us a rating on your podcasting platform of choice, or going over to the YouTube channel, clicking that subscribe button, dropping a like, any of those things, a comment. All these things help boost us in the algorithm, help more people find the podcast so that they too can learn how to be the very best like no one ever was. That was so cringy. I can't believe I just said that.
All right, quick.
If you guys
Something
want to
else.
stay plugged in and connected with us, the best way to do that is over on Twitter. You can follow myself at Chip Ritchie, Azul at Azul underscore GG, and you can also follow the podcast at Uncommon underscore Energy. Every week, once again, Tuesday, 7 a.m. Eastern. Thank you all so much for your support as always.
Yep. See you next week. Peace.
Happy holidays, Merry Christmas.